the break is finally over. What do I mean by that? The student loan debt pause is done. And I know a lot of us thought that the student loans that we had would be paid off. Unfortunately, that did not happen. However, we now had the opportunity to figure out a different strategy on how to eliminate our student loan debts. Instead of relying on the government, we can rely on our ingenuity and velocity banking to help pay off our student loan debts. So that's what I'm going to talk about in today's video. I'm going to go over a sample case study, and this is a case study on the average income earned from a recent college graduate. So we look at that. The recent college graduates on average earn about $3,915 a month. And let's say that you just graduated and you got a job in the tech industry, you're an entry-level data analyst or something like that, and you have to move out to either Texas or one of these major cities. I looked at the average expense for recent college graduates, and it's very difficult to get a specific gauge on it, but the number that I came up with is $3,025 a month in terms of expenses. And depending on where you live, this could be a little bit more or a little bit less, so you have to factor that in. And we have a cash flow of $890, which means we can definitely do velocity banking. So let's look at our debts, right? Student loan is the big thing. We have about, I believe the number was $3.7 trillion in student loan debt. So everybody who's gone to college has understand that this is a huge problem, and there is a bubble, I believe, with student loan debt. And if we don't figure out how to pay this off, this is going to cause a lot of stress. And we don't want that. We want peace of mind while we're trying to build the lifestyle that we want. So how can we get rid of student loan debt quickly? So let's say you just got your job, you're a recent college graduate, you have student loan debt. The average student loan debt, by the way, that I looked up was $37,000. So around that on average. Let's say you needed a new car to get around to your new job, and you got an apartment, so there's no mortgage. And let's say you just got one credit card because you're a recent college grad and you don't have that much credit history. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the numbers. And let's say you acquired a debt tool, you got approved for a line of $10,000 at 14%. So let's begin velocity banking, right? So what do, right? We take our first chunk, 66% of the line, which is the amount we can take up to. We do our first chunk. So what debts do we pay off, right? So I think the credit card would be an easy win. Let's say that you had to get some furniture, so supplies for your new apartment that you moved into. Cool, that's okay. We can just wipe that off with the debt tool. So that's gone. Boom, increased cash flow by $25. The rest of the money now goes into the student loan debt. And even though the car payment is a more inefficient loan than the student loan debt, the car payment is a fixed interest. So even if we pay it off early, we still won't save on interest costs. So it would be more beneficial to pay off the student loan first, because we are saving on interest costs that way. So rest of the money that comes out from this chunk, which I believe is about $5,225, gets dumped into the student loan debt, bringing that balance down to $31,525, right? So then now we do velocity banking. If you remember, right, we put our paycheck in the debt tool. So we pay that down, and then we're taking out our expenses over the month as we need them, right? So it's not all at once, and that way the interest costs don't rise quicker than we need it to. So, right, we put our paycheck in, the balance is now $2,685. We take out our expenses for the month, and remember, we satisfied our payment for the student loan debt, so our expenses are actually really lower than what it would normally be. So we're talking about $2,607, and then we have to factor in the interest cost, which is $77. And once we do that, we pull that money out, and the interest gets factored in. The balance for February now is $5,369. Cool. So then we just keep repeating that process. We dump the money in, right? It lowers our balance. Then we take the money out that we need for expenses. Now remember, since we didn't satisfy the payment for the student loan this month, then the expenses for February are going to be a little bit higher. So I calculated it at $2,950. Then we also have the interest cost, and that brings our balance into March to $4,466.65 for March. And as you can see, we are getting closer to whittling this down. As we put our paycheck in, we get all the way down to $551.65. So then again, we take out whatever we need for the expenses. The interest cost for this month, as our balance begins to lower, is only $52. So in April, our balance now is $3,553.65. So as you can see, our income is actually more than the balance in April. So cool, we wipe out the line of credit that way, right? There's still some interest that we got to pay, and we have to factor in that there might be some expenses that we need to pull out money from the line to pay for, especially like rent, which is due on the first of the month. You might need to pull that out before we dump the rest of the excess cash back into the line to pay for things that we need to do. So in April, what we are doing is shifting what we need to shift in order to prepare for the second chunk, which is going to come in May. So if you have to pull out extra cash in order to pay for certain debts throughout the month, that's cool. And then we're just preparing for the next chunk, which we take since the line is zeroed out. So we take our next chunk, right? And this time, since the credit card is paid off, we literally can dump the entire amount into the student loan payments. And also realize that over these past 3 months, we've also been paying this amount. Actually, it's a little less than this amount, because once you pay down student loan debt, student loans are broken down into multiple loans. So I personally have like 4 different Stafford loans. And once you allocate money to a specific one, you can pay off one loan, and then it'll basically give you 3 loans left. So that's what the hope is, that this minimum payment will be lower with that big chunk, because you're taking out maybe one loan with that chunk. So I calculated that the minimum loan payment will go down to $343, and we've been paying that for the past 3 months. So then we factor that into the chunk, and that brings our student loan balance down to $24,025. Right? So as you can see, man, we're wiping this debt out. We went from 37 all the way down to 24 in a couple months. So let's do it. Let's keep repeating velocity banking. Right? The numbers for May are pretty much the same as in January. So we do that. And then we go to June. The numbers are a little different because our cash flow is now lowered. Cash flow is increased because the student loan payment is being lowered every single time we do that chunk. So now that it's being lowered, our expenses are now $2,900 for the month. So that's what we're pulling out. And then the interest cost, same as February. So we calculate that up. And our balance for July, $4,416. So a little less than March, which is good. We're on the right track. We keep lowering the cost over time, right? And then August, we'll be able to zero out the line of credit again and prepare for the next chunk, however we have to do that. And we have a little bit more excess cash flow here, about $450 in excess cash flow that we can utilize. And instead of pulling out, we can use that to pay off debt. So then we go to September, right? And then we take out our third chunk of $6,600. That brings the balance all the way down to $16,625. Again, so we repeat velocity banking, doing it over and over. And again, as you can see, By the end of the year, we'll zero out the line, and then we'll have the ability to do another chunk starting next year. So how much debt did we actually remove in 1 year? So by my calculations, the amount of debt that we eliminated was around $20,000, and this is a tremendous amount to pay off in 1 year. So again, I don't know if you could do this with the debt snowball method or the debt avalanche. It's just not as fast as velocity banking from what I've seen. So in 1 year, we've eliminated $20,000 in debt. We've reduced our minimum payments. We've actually increased cash flow. And now we will be able to, if all the numbers stay the same, pay off our student loan debt in 2025, right? And then we can begin to focus on paying off our car. And keep in mind that we've already been paying down the car payment. So we can begin to pay that down next year once we finish paying off the student loan debt. And then also considering increasing our income, maybe getting a side hustle, decreasing our expenses so our cash flow can increase. There's a whole bunch of things we can do, but this is just a conservative estimate on how you guys can pay off student loans as quickly as possible with velocity banking. And I hope this is an eye-opening video. And for the recent college grads, I hope you guys can at least see that there's a path and a strategy to help you pay down debt as quickly as possible, even though the government, who said they would pay off your debts, did not do it. Does not matter. We have the strategy and the knowledge on how to do it now. So take full advantage, implement this system, and become debt-free on your journey to financial freedom.